Hey, Miriam,
Hey there.
how are you?
I'm good.
Good. How's your world?
It's all right.
How's Leia doing?
How are you doing, Leah? She's right here. She's listening into. She's doing all right.
That's good.
I mean, not back to normal yet, but
But out of crisis mode.
well, out of crisis mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that.
She's wearing a heart monitor now.
Okay.
So it's a new fashion accessory.
Hopefully people won't try to keep up with her on that one.
It's very 21st. All the cool kids are doing it.
Really? Oh, I'm on video. Sorry. You're talking to my whatever. Ooh, that's very red. Hey,
Very
where's your picture from? Your like wave ocean thing?
For me,
Really?
yeah, I painted that.
Wow, it's so cool.
Thank you.
Oh, wow.
That's better. Okay. That's much better.
Yeah, this is what I really should be spending my time doing, don't you think?
Yes, without a doubt.
That is gorgeous.
Wow.
Or I should at least be like painting with my daughter, who also paints. So we should like be reclaiming our space. This is my daughter Leia, for Nate. Yeah, this is my daughter Leia.
Great studio.
She's the environmental engineer that I rely upon for all things science.
And your artistic other half. I think you guys should paint together. I think it's a great idea.
It's true, we should.
Gail, do you know we can't see you?
Yes, I thought you didn't need to watch me finish my supper.
No.
Okay.
I'll tune back in visually when I'm finished.
Okay.
That's showing good etiquette. I was on a Zoom meeting. I won't say who it was. It was a town resident who was eating dinner during the Zoom meeting. It was a large meeting. And then she had a glass of wine and then she fell asleep. And she was like sleeping with this glass of wine. It was priceless. Things not to do on Zoom.
Exactly. Yeah. So I know Graham's not joining us. So I think we just have to wait for Leslie, then we should be.
Graham won't be able to come?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think he's out of town.
Michael, your screened-in porch looks really cool. Gray, are you enjoying it?
Oh, totally. It's been a lifesaver.
I have
This
to
is what
come
you
over.
spent the summer working on, right?
I spent the winter working on it.
Yeah.
Me and my friend were outdoors building the thing during
Me
like
and my friend.
December and January.
I need to come over and inspect it because it's one of my dream next projects is a screened-in porch.
Yeah, it's delightful.
Yeah.
And with climate change and more mosquitoes, it's really even better.
Oh, yeah, it is a good idea.
Although I feel like the drought it's been like mosquito-less.
Yeah, we haven't any mosquitoes.
It's
Yeah.
been so strange.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, after we built it, I was waiting for that first moment when I would sit inside and I'd hear the thwack of a mosquito on the outside. And I'd be like, haha.
Yes.
So, but yeah, you can come over anytime, Miriam.
I will.
Yeah, just check it out.
Zoe, I think you're a half glass full gal.
I definitely am.
Yeah. I mean, if you see the drought as no mosquito land as a plus, yay. That's good.
Yeah. Well, it's also like a creepy kind of feeling, but I also, I'm not a fan of mosquitoes.
There's always the mosquito magnet in the family.
Me.
You are,
I'm
Michael?
so-
No, I'm not, but that's good. So if we all go for a walk, Zoe, we'll make sure to include you.
yeah. Thank you.
It's always a good strategy to have that mosquito person.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. The trap.
or shall we start and see if Leslie pops in? And I'm pretty sure she knows because she asked me earlier today if we were meeting, so I'm assuming she'll pop in at some point.
And
But-
our minutes are crucial to the agenda.
They are a key part. But so I'll call us to order at 7:04, and I'll start by thanking Nate for stepping up and doing minute taking for Graham since he's not here. So thank you. Nate, did you and Graham talk? I'm assuming maybe we should ask Graham to do minutes next time. Did that come up, or should I just remind him?
I think we had talked about him stepping
Subbing
in
for
for me
you?
the next time I come around.
Okay, cool.
So
That sounds good. So let's see. So I think Leslie's next. I'll remind her when she shows up. Cool. That sounds good.
Yeah.
So we'll do our fun mandatory public comment. At some point, I'm assuming some people might be interested. But
We don't have
hearing,
Public, all except for my daughter here.
yes. Leah, do you have any comments?
Do you have any comments, Leah?
No, I'm just interested to hear what you guys talk
This is
about.
Leah Berlin for the minutes.
Oh.
Yeah, with an H, Leah.
Hi, Leah.
Yeah,
But I think that's a real tip. Who knows of our existence? Who is even interested? Who knows how to get here to our web pages or to our meetings if they are interested?
I'll spread the
just
word.
like every other committee.
This is
Just
the
area.
old,
People seem to
Web
find their way to
question.
the Conservation Commission meeting without any problem.
yeah,
Yeah,
Well-
when we have a controversy, they will find us.
yeah, there you
Guaranteed.
go.
So in some regards,
Thems we don't need or want, but hey,
exactly. Leslie has shown up.
there she is.
Yeah.
Hey, Leslie.
I'm always wondering when it says connecting to audio, I assume they can't hear us yet. There you go. Hi, Leslie.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm all right. How about yourself?
Good. We just got started a couple of minutes ago. And the one thing I'll note is you're up next time for minutes, just FYI.
No, anything but that.
You know,
No,
I
you-
could take minutes. I haven't taken minutes yet, you guys.
Oh, good. Thank you, Miriam. I just
But,
finished the minutes.
okay, so Miriam will go next and then
I will.
we'll
Okay,
and then we'll get Leslie into the
Okay.
rotation
you.
again.
Thank you.
Okey dokey. So why don't we discuss the minutes so we can approve them? So we've got two, although it only says one on the agenda, but there's the May 31st, which Leslie finished and said that, I don't know if people got to read them.
yes.
Is it sufficient to sort of discuss them and?
Yeah.
Okay, anyone want to move to approve them?
Well, I had a couple corrections.
I do this every meeting. We have to vote to approve them and second, and then we do
Oh,
discussion.
God. Okay. I never do it that way. Okay.
I move to approve the minutes of May 31st, 2022.
Thank you. Second?
I'll
Any
Any
second. it.
discussion?
Great. Okay. Any discussion? Miriam?
Yes. So Graham's name is his first name is misspelled.
Correct.
It says Gareem, I think, instead of the proper spelling.
At
And then-
7:10, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just going to be really nitpicky about this, but it rubs me. So DeFont is spelled with a capital F,
Oh,
just like DeCara is spelled with a capital C.
Right.
Correct.
Us-
Which is true for
Italian
Zoe's
too.
minutes too.
Yeah.
And as the person who posts these minutes, I'm going to alphabetize those lists every time anyway. And we'll make sure that it's D font and D Chiara.
We can
Okay,
just have everyone have a DE in front of their name and we can just go like, you know,
D Fleischaker?
It could be our bonding experience.
so yes, thank you, Miriam. Okay,
Any other comments about Leslie's minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'll do the roll. Miriam, aye.
I wasn't there.
Okay. Nate,
Aye.
Gail,
aye.
Leslie,
aye.
Zoe,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. So 5 ayes, 1 abstention. Congratulations, Leslie. You've Got your first approved minutes. It's a rite of passage and you just didn't know that it was one.
I rewatched the video and learned some more stuff too.
Zoom is handy. Gail.
But you know, this is a point that you brought up, Zoe, at the very beginning. For those of us who have not written minutes,
Mhm.
what's really entailed? How do you do it? And what's accepted and what's approved and what do you really want to see? So perfectly fair business. So yeah,
Oh, it's,
all good learning.
yeah. And I think it varies from committee to committee and town to town and year to year. So my pen just fell apart. So do I have a motion to approve the August 2nd minutes of 2022?
Look at those.
No one wants to move to approve them?
I will move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Nate.
I can't. I have
Everyone to
trouble
second
with
them?
That's my name.
I'll second them.
Great.
Oh, I want
okay.
to know.
Any discussion?
How's my name spelled?
Wrong.
I
Your
can't
name is,
find them. I can't find them. So you could just
I
tell me.
had no comments with suggested changes or amendments. So as I sent them out.
great. Yeah, I actually, they got lost in my crazy life, but it was, Miriam's name was not capitalized. And then I had one other,
Oh, my bad.
yeah.
Apologies, Miriam.
And then
Okay,
the only other thing for process wise, which I think we only voted on one thing. No, so there's two things. So when we voted to approve the minutes and we voted to adjourn, you only said moved and seconded, but we have to say who moved and who seconded.
Are you serious?
Yes. It's so that people who aren't there know who did it.
Right.
It's called transparency, Gail, for the public.
Yes, sir. I'll plug somebody in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those and the Fs need to be capitalized.
Yes.
Yes, cool. So, any other comments about those minutes? They were very prompt. Thank you. So, we'll do the roll. Nate,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
Zoe,
Aye.
Leslie,
Aye.
Gail,
I
and I'm an aye. Okay. Unanimous. Okay, we got that done. Cool. So the big part of our agenda, I think, is just updates and continuing items for last time. And I'll just sort of the three categories, and you can tell me if we're missing anything. It's discussing CCA some more, talking about the ARPA funds, talking about the actually, this is a new one-ish, prioritization within the MVP, HMP activities. That was Nate's suggestion last time. And I have something I can just share so we can discuss that. And then finalizing the liaisons for the other committees. That's sort of like the 4 points of business for the rest of the meeting. Anything else? I sort of got to do an agenda review at the beginning, but is there anything else you want to add? Okie dokie. So, I'll just start. So let's do CCA first. And I'll just start one thing and then maybe Nate, you can jump in since you did a bunch of work on this stuff. But I exchanged, no, actually I talked to Rita after our last meeting. Because, Gail reported that the select board had a conversation, the select board of 2. But I was surprised by that. And it turns out Rita was surprised by that. So she didn't know it was on the agenda either. So, what I told her was we wanted to get on the dance card another time and be prepared to ask questions since, Gail happened to be there, but I wasn't necessarily prepared to answer all the questions that the select board had. So I think that's still the possibility. I haven't asked for a date yet because I thought we should discuss a little more, but Rita was in agreement that we should get back on the agenda. So I think that's good to know. But Nate, you want me to hand it over to you since you did the FAQs and that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So, the idea to put together a set of FAQs was kind of in the back of my head for a while, just, knowing that people have a lot of questions, and, some of those questions were originating here within ECAC, and then, Gail had communicated some of the questions of the select board. So, yeah, so I put together this document, and I can share it with the group, if that, just so it's in front of people.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Maybe, but yeah, the idea was to just put together something that would, maybe in some cases sort of preempt some future like classic FAQ, right? What are we talking about? What does it mean for my electricity bill? Things of that nature. But I did receive some really helpful comments from committee members. What I have in front of us here does not reflect the integration of those changes, but that would be my next step, I think. But yeah, just in considering, like, I know that not everything is here, so I think helpful suggestions for improving this document might be raising additional questions, in addition to helping to make sure that the language is clear, considering, a non-technical audience, right? Because as soon as you start diving into a subject, you sort of forget what your beginner's mind was when you started looking into it, right? So you start dropping acronyms and things. So yeah, I just wanted to put this in front of the committee as a very drafty draft, but a first effort at trying to answer some of the questions that this committee had, but also in thinking about our next outreach to the select board. And then if we were to get a green light from the select board, then the community as a whole, because yeah, there are a lot of like really great questions, and so I humbly submit this to the committee. Miriam, you've got your hands up.
Yeah, I had a couple of comments, suggestions, and if you want to scroll up to the top,
Yes.
just especially if you're trying to make this a frequently asked questions for like a very naive person from the public. And what I would suggest is that you define first what aggregation is, because that is not a clear word to the average person, and describe what the current state of affairs is. Who does what in the current grid supply players, or even have a little graphic to describe that so people kind of understand what we're changing and what's remaining the same. And who sets the prices now versus, you could even think of it as a table. Currently this is who are the players under community choice irrigation. These are the players and who do what. That might be another way to do it. So that people can see that, so that people really take away that, what this really does.
Yeah. And we could have two documents too, if we wanted.
And the other question I would put in there is something that sort of addresses how complicated is this going to be for our town? Do we need to have engineers and financial consultants to do this? Or is this something that is within the easy reach of a small town like us? Because I think that's the next question people might have is, oh my God, this is just too complicated, sort of thing. So that was
cool. Thanks, Maria. Gail.
I sent Nate a whole bunch of edits and what I thought were clarifications, etc. But I really laud the work that you put into this, Nate. This is really a great starting point. But I think the question that was really raised most pointedly by the select board and that we addressed in our last meeting was, at what point and by whom are the various options selected? And that'll come up, I'm sure, as a question at the town meeting where we vote on the whole. They'll want to know what the whole is. And I'm wondering if you've had a chance to talk with, what's his face, about where in the process of those sequence of steps that he outlined, where this would fall.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Gail. I did reach out to Colonial, and the way I understand the process, and I think that this is something that's worth like asking and asking again in like slightly different ways, and then, you know, probably reaching out to other communities that have gone through the process already, especially since there are so many. I don't know who I would reach out to. You know, we did talk to someone from Conway, of course, but my understanding of how the vote works is there is a vote on an article at a town meeting, and that article, based on the standard language that most towns seem to use, empowers the select board to undertake aggregation. And when the group that receives the bid proposals and then decides whether to, you know, reject the proposals that the broker assembles, that would be the select board that does that. I don't think there are two separate town meeting votes with separate articles. And then while I'm just on the this voting question, some towns will include two separate articles. One is, should we aggregate our electricity or not? And then they will, some towns have included a secondary vote to endorse the principle of having green electricity and decarbonization be an explicit objective of the aggregation, right? So when I assembled all of those rate structures from neighboring communities and, you know, sort of similarly sized towns, there was like one example that stood out. Hatfield, they don't offer any increased green options within their aggregation plan. It's possible just to have the objective of lowering rates, and the town just aggregates and goes out to bid, and then they offer that. That's the new default for the town. And there's no secondary objective of reducing carbon emissions or increasing the use of green energy within the community. So it makes sense to me to put that up to the town for a vote. But I just wanted to mention that that sort of separation there, because it's not inherent to CCA that an objective would be to, you know, burn less fossil fuel. But that's how a lot of communities are using the ability to take over the supply from the utility monopoly.
Right. So I'll jump in, Nate, since you're less bruised with town politics, I'll tell you my thought. The more questions that come before town meeting, the more controversial it is, the more people have attending our meetings. And it seems like, I mean, my sense is we got appointed as a committee to come up with recommendations that then goes to the select board. And so there's already two decision points where we as a committee can decide, you know, and should discuss more fully one question or two questions. That's sort of like, it's totally fair game, in my opinion, for us to discuss that and come up with a recommendation. we can then make that recommendation to the select board, then they get to do the same thing, because they decide what goes on the warrant, so they can split it up. But I think we shouldn't assume that, that we would do it, like for me personally, I think we shouldn't, why spend the effort if we're not actually gonna, we could save people money, but if we're not gonna adjust climate issues, it sort of raises a serious question of why bother. There's other ways to save money, but we should have that conversation among the committee, and if there's clarity about how we move forward with the select board, I think it's fine. Every committee has got some expertise or responsibility to sort of figure out what their recommendation is. So I don't think we're beholden to split it up. Gail?
But I agree, but what Nate suggests is very interesting. We could have a warrant that says yes or no, do you want to aggregate? And if yes, then a second warrant article would be, here's what the committee recommends in terms of options. And that could be voted yes or no.
Right. No, I fully understood that. And I guess we should put it on the agenda so, everyone's ready to talk about it and Grandma's here. But I guess the question would be, if we were to just go, if the town had the choice to have 2 votes and they said, we want to aggregate, but we don't want to do green, or we don't care enough to do green. It raises the question of, from where we
Is
as
it worth it?
ECAC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't presume an outcome. Nate, you had a question?
Yeah, and I don't want to get ahead of us if we want to have this be an agenda item on a future call, but I was just thinking about how it might play out. And, one possibility is reducing carbon footprint of electricity generation is voted down, but you're still making it easier. So that affects what you put in the default, right?
Right.
So the default is going to be the state minimum. Thank you. But then you're still offering, perhaps even at a lower rate than the basic national grid rate, more green energy. You're making it easier for people. The glide path is easier. And there's risk there, right? In putting that option to the town, when as a climate committee, related committee, we're wanting to encourage greater adoption of green energy. But then if the town approves it, then it might affect your decision to make the default 5% more, or maybe 10% more above the baseline, the state required minimum. So I can imagine it playing out in a couple different ways, but I was just imagining what a yes vote might mean for how aggressive the town has expressed itself to be in wanting to adopt a higher percentage of green electricity. It might affect your thinking about what default to propose.
Yeah. Leslie?
I'm curious, circling back to Co-op Power's community solar, how that, I know this is something so different, but I'm still excited about that. And I don't know if that means we have to find places in town, or like myself, we just hop on with Co-op Power and then we do spend less on our electricity. And perhaps, I've always wanted to develop a program to help people understand how to lessen their carbon footprint in everyday life, because it is really possible. Because I know some people just feel like, well, great, I'll just get it off the solar panel and I can use as much as I want. And so those are 2 things I'm saying. One is, what about community solar? And what about perhaps me or somebody else or a bunch of us on the committee helping people in town with a program, maybe through the library or New Salem Academy, just really understand how to live a really juicy, wonderful life and lessen your carbon footprint.
I don't think any of these are mutually exclusive. They might be sequential only in terms of like
Mhm.
capacity, but
Right.
because I don't think we took community solar off the table or the changing lifestyles. So I think those are still live.
Yeah,
I do
I-
think if we try to bundle them, connect them, they'll get conflated and people will get confused.
Right.
Just based on stuff. Gail?
I was wondering, Nate, from what you said, if we might contact some of the other communities who have gone through this process and ask them what their experience is after the fact of exactly this question, in terms of maybe some guidance as to how to approach it to, I don't know, figure out what the community really wants or what we want as a committee or what we want to recommend as opposed to what we're trying to figure out from the community.
I also think, to jump in, we've talked about this public education, event where, we invite people to learn about it, but we could also use that as a way of gauging interest, because I think I'm reflecting back on the survey, that Gail has helped facilitate, where people were looking for things that they wanted to do more. So we can use this, I think, as a way of sort of engaging to answer those questions, Dave, of like, where are the points and the options, because if it does pass, we're going to need to know that, but we don't have to know that until it passes. Though I will say, especially in talking to Becky today, she reminded me something, which is there's always, some people always say we can't vote unless we know all the details. And then there's other people who say we know all the details and either we like it or we don't like it. So there's either way. The library is a perfect example of that. The first time around, we had details and plans and people said we weren't included, we didn't know, and we're against it. Other people loved it. And then this time, the state required the process to be different, so there's no details. And we voted to approve it. And some people were fine with that, and some people were not. So it'll be the same thing with this. They'll say, how can we approve it if we don't know how much it's going to cost or what the choices are? And other people will say, let's just approve it and figure that out after. Once we know it's real, we'll have the conversation. So it cuts both ways. Yeah.
One of the things that was suggested at the last
Can we,
meeting
can we
was
not
to have-
share the documents so I can see everybody a little easier?
Excuse me?
Oh, could we just stop the document sharing so I can see people a little easier?
Yep.
Yeah,
There we
thanks.
go.
Great.
At the last meeting, Miriam, you and others suggested that we have forums in terms of educating the public, but it seems to me that at those forums would be a likely place to, here's the general outlay of what CCA, what are you as community members really interested in? Help us decide how to go about this, or how, what is important in your mind. From the committee's point of view, we're interested in reduced cost, solar, blah, blah, blah. But what do you as community members really want? And what would you like to see as part of your option? Have them tell us.
Right. I think that's exactly one of the things we can get out of it. Which is different from having that be a vote. It's sort of
Exactly, yeah.
engagement. So,
And then we take that information to the town meeting and either build it into the warrant or have a secondary warrant or whatever. But we already know then what at least a generalized vision of self-selected, again, folks would have us believe they want.
yeah. So I'm gonna, if it's okay, sort of circle back to the beginning, maybe wrap us up. And I guess Nate, I'll just underscore, thank you for putting this together.
Yeah.
It's a huge help. And I think it is a valuable document. My sense is it can be a living document. So if you incorporate, the input, whether from tonight and the emails from other people, we can bring that forward to the select board. I'm sure they're going to ask things that maybe we want to include. And it does strike me, the two things that Miriam said, I always worry about having a document that tries to do everything. But if we had, current state and a proposed state, that might make sense. And then another table that's sort of a timeline of what we know happens. And for people who want to know, it'll be helpful. Inevitably, there are people who will not read it and will ask the questions, but at least we'll have a document to share.
Yeah.
But I think those are three things that are probably, and if you want help with it, let me know, and I'm happy to sort of work on those other two with you. Unless someone else wants to. But any other thoughts about this? Does this make sense? And I think what I'll do just to wrap it up is I'll check with Rita to figure out when they want us to come to them. I'm hoping and assuming it'll be in September, but I'll just check in with her. Yeah.
Do we have a definite date for the special town meeting? They said later in the fall, but do we know when that's going to be? Is it October, November?
No, although,
Do we have time to play with it, I guess is the question.
yeah. And I can. I'm trying to think if I know what this means, but just segueing into the ARPA conversation. I did talk to, when I talked to Becky today, it seems like state funding for the school roof is highly unlikely, which is really disappointing. So our legislators did a really good job, but there's like state politics and bureaucrats who got offended or something. So if the town has to spend money, I'm thinking, you know, that's what we were waiting for. The town was sort of waiting to hear from the state. So it might be sooner than later, but you know, that could be October, could be November. I don't think it'd be as late as December, which is what was floated at one point, but I don't think anybody knows. I would say, my guess would be October, November. September is way too soon, just logistically to pull off the town meeting. So, are we good with this one?
Yep.
This topic?
Thank you,
Cool.
Nate.
Yeah, thank you, Nate.
Yeah.
So the segue into the ARPA stuff, I'll just report out. So I met with Becky today. And I think Miriam was the one who suggested I talk to her because she's got knowledge from years of doing this stuff. So I asked her about the various elements of the ARPA funding that we were looking for. Basically said, you know, the select board is not going to consider giving us money unless we have some figures that are researched to some degree that you can hang your hat on.
Right.
In terms of the climate response fund, something she told me is, I guess, well, so some of you know, there used to be an energy committee that, you know, was in existence that got closed down, and then we sort of got reconstituted as energy and climate. Becky had said that like 7 years ago, she was thinking about creating an energy fund to do similar stuff. And I was like, oh, what a good idea. And that the FinCom at that point, and I guess more recently, said this, they didn't want to just fund things without knowing what was in it, that you need a plan. And so I think one of our, maybe it's a medium-term goal, is to develop, like, if we had a 5-year plan of what we would want to do, and we could roll it out and say, we're going to do these activities, and roughly this is what it costs, then I think they would be apt to fund it. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be a budget line item, but we'd at least have to have an articulated plan for what the activities are. So I think in terms of the ARPA money, she was saying that they're not going to fund just they'll put money in as a placeholder. So that was helpful, disappointing, but helpful. And I think we can talk about this multi-year plan down the road. We talked about this siting for solar on municipally owned buildings. And she said, I mean, I wish Graham were here for this part too, because he might have a little insight, but apparently somewhere in the last 7 to 10 years, maybe, the Energy Committee actually went out to all the municipally owned land and buildings. Because Miriam, do you know Larry Hunter?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he was on the committee.
Yeah.
And Clark Sylvester. And so those two in particular sort of took the lead on solar. And then they actually knew stuff. So they went out with their little measuring light machines and stuff. And went to all the places and figured things out. I asked her if she had some kind of report of their findings. She said, no, it's probably in their minutes, which may or may not be true, getting back to how people take minutes. So we can look through those if we want to, but At some point, we can reach out to them and see if they actually have notes on their own that didn't make it into the minutes, but that,
The minutes are posted on the inactive committee, energy committee.
yeah,
And
I
they
thought I-
quit and I couldn't get anybody to find minutes beyond the 2012.
Yeah, they did not meet regularly. When I was on select board, they didn't meet for 2 years, so that was part of the,
They
The
couldn't get a
reason.
quorum, so they couldn't have minutes, because they couldn't have a meeting.
yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
But Larry and Clark are still in town
Right.
and we talk to them.
And they've got,
Yes.
yep.
Exactly. And they were interested in it. So, so they looked into it, and part of it was figuring out funding to do it. And Becky had said that the other thing, this is very frustrating, but apparently there was a fund. So you know how we were putting money every year into the library, or put in 25 grand every year? So apparently that was happening with the energy committee, where they were putting in some small amount of money, and it built up to about $90,000. And then a few years ago, because of all the discussion about the town having too rich of money that they were holding and doing nothing with, that money got swept out and got used for other stuff. So there's now zero money, and probably that fund is closed. But they were using that because they wanted to move forward on maybe doing some of these sites. So it sort of went down the road a little bit, and then now it got all washed away. So there is some resident knowledge about them. But she didn't think at this point that we could get ARPA money for that, but she, I did say that we were interested in figuring out what were the good sites, and, being able to prioritize what had likelihood. So it seems like the starting point would be talking to Clark and Larry, and at least getting an understanding of what research they did, and then building off of that. So I think, Gail, you and Graham and I were the ones who sort of had articulated some interest in the muni solar, so maybe that we could reach out to them and figure that out. And then the stormwater management, we had a big discussion about, which was good. And I sent you all this report that she found that got done. It was for Sandusfield, Sheffield, and New Marlborough. And the thing that she'd said about that, if you look on, it's at the beginning, I think it's like page 15 or something, they basically created a template, and this is focused on stormwater and dirt roads. And the idea was, if you have a template where you can look at the characteristics of a dirt road, you can figure out which ones need more immediate action and which don't. So what's the condition, what's the grade? There's a whole bunch of variables that they came up with. And it was a pretty broad discussion, so we talked about the Concom's interest in stormwater, and we talked about the highway department, and then we talked about climate and flooding, and a range of stuff. And I think what Becky and I both agreed is there's lots of reasons and entities that have concern about stormwater. I actually suggest that stormwater might not be the correct term, because it's more than just stormwater. There's flooding, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So we have to figure out what the term is. But what it came down to, she didn't think because we're gonna have to pay for the school roof, all of a sudden it brings down the ARPA money to about $250,000 or $200,000. And given what everyone's wanting, she didn't think we would put a lot of money into it, but she did agree that we needed to take the first step. And what she and I discussed was, if we can't get an assessment, then we can't go for grants, and we can't budget as a town. So the baseline is we have to get an assessment. And we have to take that first step in that regard. So she was going to look into figuring out how much it would cost to take whatever that first step looked like, whether it was coming up with this report, this template kind of thing, so we can evaluate just dirt roads, or we can look at sort of other water-related climate situations. So I think she's on board at this point with helping us come up with a number that we can put in for ARPA funding, and it won't be the whole kit and caboodle, but it'll get us started, which is good. So that was a helpful conversation.
I have a little bit of information related to that.
Oh, yeah, can I ask, I just reminded me one more thing and then I'll hand it over. She did say, this connects to the last two things. She heard from someone at FERCog recently, which I'd never heard of, is that you can use MVP action grants for solar, and
That's
municipal
where
solar.
Miriam's going. Yeah.
Oh, is that it?
No,
Oh, okay. So that was interesting because it sort of touches both things that, you know, if we could free up some money to go for another MVP grant and do solar, it might free up needing to ask for this, but you're on, Miriam.
I think stormwater is the right word, Michael, because in the world of water control, flooding falls under, that's the term that's used for flooding, for erosion control, for road maintenance. So it is stormwater is the right word. As
Okay,
opposed to groundwater, we're talking about water, and there's different kinds of water. We're not talking about surface water or groundwater, drinking water, well water. We're talking about stormwater, water that is related to weather.
yeah, well, so this is where you just reminded me, like, where it got broad. So she was talking about, I'm guessing you're well aware of this spot, the driveway on Montague Road that's going into the culvert or a wannabe culvert, it freezes over all the time. Anyway, what she was saying was that, and you might know more than me, but that part of the issue was there was a driveway built that then created additional water that fed into the wetlands. And so, you know, I said, if people are building driveways, that's creating more problems, like that should be something the planning board could look at, because we probably haven't revisited the driveway part of the zoning
Oh,
in
wow.
forever. So it is related to stormwater, but it sort of gets bigger.
Yeah, I
of
would
like-
say one of the things that would be helpful in Shutesbury would be for us or somebody to look at a stormwater bylaw. Which, because one of the things that we don't have any regulation for example, are when people berm their driveways, which they do all the time.
When people do what?
Berm their driveway,
Okay.
which technically, yes, it's in the right of way, though the town doesn't like assert that as an issue. The town could assert, you know, hey, you're berming the driveway in the right of way. Stop doing that. That land is technically our land.
Mhm.
But the problem is, you know,
Is this when you put walls on the side
no,
or
when
the
you
bottom?
a hump at the end of it to keep water
Okay.
from getting onto your driveway.
Oh,
You could
Oh,
put
if you're
berms
going
on the
down.
side too, but what often happens is that people don't want water getting down their driveway if their driveway
goes downhill.
goes downhill, right? So that means they want to shunt the water back onto the lake, onto the road. And so you have properties where, you know, the natural drainage pattern should be that those properties need to accept some water, but people don't want to do it. So, but you know, that's where sometimes a stormwater bylaw would be helpful, and you might want to look at those. There's a bunch of towns and cities that have them. But what I was also going to say, this was the other piece about FERCog. That's why I was smiling, because I thought this was what maybe you were going to talk about, is that the planning department at FERCog has been working with the Lake Wyola Association to get a watershed engineering analysis.
Oh, interesting.
And FERCog ponied up some money from a grant it had, and was able to commit $20,000, and the engineering study was completed and then was found to be insufficient and properly done. And so now they don't want to use it. They don't want to release it. I came and get a copy of it, which is kind of a concern. I don't know how that can be, but so now they're talking about, they're going to use that as a starting point for another engineering study. So
Insufficient on what grounds and by whose rubric?
I don't know, since I haven't read it, but what I was told was that it didn't consider the holistic watershed in the way that they wanted it to, and that its remedies and solutions were too minimal to have any impact, and that they didn't feel like sufficient effort was put into it. Somebody didn't do their homework.
Is this a segue into our liaison activity with other committees, et cetera? I mean, watershed bylaw would involve how many town committees? Concom, planning
I
board,
think it would be
zoning,
something that definitely would sit nicely with the planning board.
and
Though,
Concom,
and I think Concom would want to have a
DBA.
discussion, yep. But, you know, it would allow for some regulations that might ordinarily be exempt, or for some standards, let's say, for things that would ordinarily be exempt from Concom oversight. So it
Okay.
allows, so that, you know, things that are happening outside of buffer zones, for example, where, you know, we don't really have any way of regulating easily what happens up a hill, even though it all flows down a hill into a wetland.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But
Wow.
Should I shift gears to the liaison discussion? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me share what I sent you all. Is this it? Yeah, I sent 2 documents. Let's see. There's this one. Oh. Share it here. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yep. Make it bigger on your own screen.
Yeah, I'll make it a little bigger here.
Or we can do that on our own too. Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you.
sure. And then I also, I'm not sure if I know I sent it out in the email. Let me see if I can just pull it up in my email.
The crib sheet.
Yeah, because that's a little bit easier to get one's head around. Stop share. There. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. So what I ended up doing is going through the list. And, you know, for some activities, there's multiple committees get listed. There can be up to 4. And so it needs a little bit of tweaking to figure out, well, in those activities, if there's 2 or 3 or 4 committees identified, should we go to 1, 2? Like, what's the lead committee to hit up? But based on stuff, what I came up with was this list.
Michael, can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yeah, I'll actually give me a second. I'll do
Thank you.
something
I mean,
to-
I could see it, but I'm straining.
Yeah, no, I'll make it. I'll do this differently.
Thank you.
Okay, stop share. Yeah. How's that?
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So this is what I came up with based on what people had already said. So there was no like preemptive assigning. There was 2 questions that came up just from this. One was in terms of the tree warden. Both Miriam and Leslie sort of were interested in that. And then I wasn't sure, Miriam, for Lake Wyola Advisory, if that was something that you were interested or involved in, but
sure.
I thought there were definitely things where no one had said they were just, so capital planning, fire, highway department, police, and recreation. So if we're able to fill this out tonight, whether there's that second part of like, okay, who's the lead committee, which I can show you the other thing. And maybe I'll do that just real quickly, and then it would be helpful to sort of see.
What do the yellow out areas mean?
On the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
It's,
Capital planning, for instance, that means we have no on the one you just had up.
oh, hold on, I'm sharing the wrong one, sorry.
I think it means that they need a liaison.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Leslie.
Sure.
That's the wrong one. I guess this is the right one. Weird. Oh, hold on, I'm showing, I know why I couldn't find it. This is the one.
A short
Okay.
story.
Oh. Come
Never
on,
mind then.
come on, Michael. There we go. Okay. So this is, I'll show you what I mean about multiple ones. So like, you can see like this identified priority areas for tree maintenance. There's emergency management was identified, select board and highway department. And then in a similar way, this one here, updating land use regulations. It's the planning board, the Concom, Lake Royal Advisory Committee. So we shouldn't have multiple people. We could have multiple people going to multiple committees, but we should figure out which ones are really the most important ones in terms of our engagement, so we don't get too spread too thin. So I was thinking that if we could figure out who is connected to what committee, then it would make it easier. But is everyone following my thinking? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. At the risk, now that I know that which ones I'm sharing, I'll share that other shortened one again. This one. So does anyone?
That's the orange yellow that I'm concerned that
Oh, yeah, those are the ones that are empty, that are unclaimed.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if people have, like, let's start with tree warden. I guess Miriam, Leslie, do you guys, one of you want to take the lead? Seems like Miriam, you've got Concom and Lake Loyola
Yeah. I mean,
advisory.
I interact with Don all the time because he's also an associate commissioner.
Okay.
And LWAC, I'm out constantly interacting with them. So
Okay.
I already talk to them all the time. So I would just say that would be the natural
Okay.
place for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Leslie, do you want to do the recreation committee? Would you mind? Leslie, you're thinking, or would you go?
You're muted. She's muted.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah,
I'm trying to understand, like, I don't mind working with the recreation committee, but I wasn't sure what it entailed. Is that
Well-
like being more walkability or spaces or making sure no pesticides or,
well, it goes back to that other chart that I'm sort of flipping through.
sorry.
So I think if you were to work with the recreation committee, then we can sort of go to the next chart and it would say, okay, for this activity, these committees are connected. And so I think there might be one or two committees. And then I don't know if people have interest in, and we can see if Graham wants, although Graham has emergency management already. In some regards, he could do fire and police. It's all sort of in that same bailiwick. And capital planning. But do people have any thoughts? Any particular strong interests? And we don't necessarily have to have them all. Just if it was easy, it would be good to do, but
I'll be on the recreation committee,
okay, cool.
or I'll be the liaison.
Great. That'd be cool. I can't edit this thing, but I'm writing it down, so
Yeah,
I'll
no,
make the
that's fine.
changes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense for me as well.
And does this reflect what everyone else feels like they said? Like, Zoe, you talked about library, so I got that, right? And Gail, you talked about, I wasn't quite, the ECAC stuff, I think is just taking the lead on some of our
Right.
two activities.
Right.
I think the two that we should figure out, one is highway and one is capital planning. Those are probably fire and police, they'll probably be tangential. I mean, we could, yeah.
I think what the question that arose at the last meeting is, what does it mean to say you're going to sign up for liaison? What does that really,
Yeah.
as you say, Leslie, what does that entail? What is it? if you sign up as liaison, what is? What
Well,
is?
let me share this other one again, because I think that'll be
That may
helpful.
be clear with that larger chart with lays
Yeah.
out the actual.
Here. You
This
guys,
one,
is
yeah.
yeah, is this big enough for you guys
Yep.
to see? So if we look at, say, let's see, we'll answer Leslie's question. So here, enhance walkability in town through the creation of walking paths and to popular destinations. So that's something that had moderate priority. It got identified through the MVP plan. And so for the activity of enhancing walkability in town, all these questions are like, so how does that happen? And who's responsible for making it happen? And so the answer that came up in MVP was, we could do it. We can self-initiate ourselves. We can work with Becky as town administrator, but we could also work with the recreation committee. The select board has a hand in it, maybe the planning board, maybe the highway department. You know, so this is probably the most broad in terms of different people touching it. So Leslie, for example, if you're the liaison to recreation, you could go to that committee and say, you know, don't know if you guys know about the municipal vulnerability preparedness plan that we have, but the town came up with this plan. And walkability, enhancing walkability in town is a priority that's identified. And the recreation committee was tagged as one of the committees that was responsible for thinking about this. So wanted to make you aware of it. If there's a way that you can help move this forward and think about it. If you have any questions that you want to direct ECAC, you know, about this, we can talk about it. If not, like, I'll come back in 3 months and you can tell me how you're doing, that kind of stuff. It's mostly
Yeah,
putting it on their radar and then being some version of resource. But if they say, hey, yeah, we should be doing walkability, they can run with it. That's totally cool. It's not an ownership thing for us. It's mostly sort of like poking them.
yeah, no, that feels like a good thing. I mean, I was biking up to the library the other day and the cars were going really fast and I was like, we need some bike paths and we need some safety stuff because I'm a good cyclist, but that car was really dangerously close.
Yeah,
Yeah, who's in charge of the recreation committee? Or is that the open space committee or?
Barbara Bigelow.
Okay. Do you
Yeah.
have her contact info, anybody?
I do. It's on the webpage.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll reach out. Great.
And Zoe, I would say you might have some really easy lifting to do, because when I was talking to Becky about solar, she said that in order to make the grant competitive, they talked about sustainability and resiliency and all that stuff. And so there's some, I forget where the library came in here, but let's see. I apologize. I don't want to get you guys nauseous. So
It was right under the.
there we go.
committee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
building.
I think it's already built in. But I would think, you know, like, for example, talking to Mary Ann or talking to the trustees and saying, you guys wrote this into the grant, but are there things that in particular that you're thinking about? And if they're good and we don't have to do anything, that's great. You know, we just have to know that it's moving forward. And I think at some point we might, you know, in the next few months, 6 months or something, report to the select board and say, here's our list. And we can report out on status. So the library is cruising. They're on target for resiliency. Recreation is looking for a grant, but they're invested in doing walkability. That kind of thing. You know, some are a little less clear, like this other one, Nate, that for looking at addressing heat conditions in the school. It's both this, what's the school, school came up twice. That's interesting. Oh, no, these are two separate things. Here, so this one, I guess they're sort of related. Addressing extreme heat and air conditioning. So those sort of bundled together, but one's capital planning and one's school committee.
Right.
So, you know, the school committee, most likely, if they know it's an issue, they can bring it forward on their own to capital planning. So it's not like ECAC has to do that. It's just a matter of getting the school committee to think about it. So I think it's a matter of getting on each committee's agenda and saying, you know, hi, you know, they might not even know that getting to Gail's question, who knows about energy and climate? You know, our committee anyway. So you're just going there and saying, we exist and this is what we're about. And, you know, in your purview, this thing came up. So does this make sense? Leslie?
Yeah, well, I'm also thinking about the library because I would love to see that it's more than just solar and gardens and that it doesn't smell like a new car when the doors open. So I'm thinking more of like building materials and paints and what kinds of flooring they put in and that kind of stuff.
Mhm. Well, I would say, you know, if there's always going to be the point person, if, you know, either you guys can go together,
Mhm.
if that's good, or, you know, she can go to the meeting and either bring your questions or bring back what you heard,
Sure.
but I don't think it precludes other people's participation.
Yes,
Just, it's
totally.
more make sure that someone's tagged.
Okay, great.
So,
Yeah,
so maybe what I'll do is, I know I sent out one of these documents, but I'll send them out, and if Graham wants to sign up, but does the ones that your names are next to, does that feel good? Is that reasonable amount? Okay, cool.
yeah.
Well, I will stop sharing this thing. And then I think the last, let's see if this is it. Yes, okay, let me share this thing. I keep wanting to hit the end button because it's bright red. But that would be a real problem. There we go. Okay. See if I can make this bigger for you all. How's that? Does that work? So what I did here, these are all the same activities, but I sorted them by priority. And this is what Nate had suggested, so that, you know, if we're gonna care about these things, and we're gonna spend some time trying to do it. So like research municipally owned solar installations, well, that got high. Explore incentives for individual homeowners to have self-sufficiency off the grid solar, that got a high. Explore options for enhanced and effective emergency communication with residents. So that would mean that we should make sure that we have an emergency management liaison so we can go talk to them about it. I am the liaison of the planning board, and I know we're not going to do that this year, but that's a high. We already got sort of a climate mitigation adaptation fund is not going to get funded, but you know, that was a high. And you know, there's a few moderates in here. I think I can't remember what the color coding between the blue and the orange moderates are. It might just be copying pasting, but you know, looking at a comprehensive tree and forest management program. So that was moderate. So I think it's, I can share this out and maybe we can talk about it next time, but the idea was, as we get, you know, so we got CCA queued up, we're looking at community solar and we're looking at muni solar. That's a lot to do for us, but maybe there's something in this list that we just want to make sure we're not missing that's high. Does that make sense to everybody? And I don't know if anyone has any immediate thoughts. It's all the same information. It's just when you sort it, it gets a little bit more digestible. Because that other spreadsheet was a little bit dense. So I'll share it. I'll share it out and then we can talk about it next time just to make sure. Gail?
Is this on the drive so we can sort our own way?
Not yet, because I just did it this afternoon,
Okay.
but I figured once we talked about it, I can upload it and then we can go from there. But yeah, it definitely should be. So I think for our agenda, we hit everything we needed to. What I've got for, let's see, our next meeting
Next meeting, yeah.
is,
One quick thing about the liaisons, is that something that we should be moving on right away, like reaching out to these committees and reporting back for next meeting?
Why don't we wait one more meeting and just sort of finalize it, and then we can all go out and do that. So.
Just an FYI, I think you're gonna find, because I know this is the true, that for a lot of these committees, they saw those plans and those reports and with those priorities. It's not that they never looked at them, but they're not necessarily all thinking, oh, this was on the 5-year plan. I need to like be addressing this. I mean, some will, and some of them will go, yeah, that's a really great idea, but we're super busy and we haven't done it. So
Right.
it's not on everybody's radar.
Yeah, and some people will be more open and others will be less open.
Right.
So I think until we sort of like show up and say hello, we won't really have a good gauge. But I think Zoe, to answer your question, our next meeting is supposed to be September 13th.
Correct.
So why don't we plan on this? We'll kick it off like in September when everyone's back from vacations and all that kind of stuff. And if there's, and if anyone wants to step up, or if Graham wants to do capital planning or something like that, that we have our list complete. But I appreciate the question. Good to know. So are we good for September 13th? Does that work for everybody still? Is that a so-so?
Yeah, I'm negotiating for a particular job that I might be doing that week. So.
Okay,
So, but I've been around if I have to miss, I have to miss.
yeah.
I-
That sounds, we won't assign you anything terrible if you're not there.
Sounds good.
Promises.
Yeah, and Miriam, you are minute taker next time.
I will.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Nate.
Is this a time for other areas of business or?
Yes,
Okay.
go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all received an alert about the Our Town newsletter. And I think something that we discussed before, is that a vehicle that we'd like to use to talk about the work of this committee, like a short article of some kind? I just wanted to flag that, because when I read it, I thought, oh, I think we talked about that before. Maybe just putting together, even if it's small, just to sort of address that awareness raising
Yeah.
question.
When did we get that? I don't remember seeing it.
August 4th.
Early.
August 4th.
Yeah, the deadline's like September 8th or something like that.
Okay. I totally missed that, so I'm glad you brought it up. I think we should stay on people's radar. There's a little bit of a lag time between them, but Gail?
But we're here and here's what we do. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone feel inspired to do a draft that we can? Oh, let's see, deadlines before we meet next. So I guess the mechanics of it would be if someone did a draft and share it out. People could respond just to that person. And there would be, we just sort of go on faith that whatever got incorporated would be good. So Nate, are you interested? Is that why you're raising it? You don't have, I'm not volunteering you, it's a question.
I could give it a shot. It's hard for me to say no in these situations.
We allow you to say no. You don't have to do it.
Is anyone else super interested in? So I think that's the situation.
Yeah. Well, I normally have, like, I've written things on different committees. I think just given my personal life, I'm hard pressed to think that I could write something. But if you wanted, I mean, if everyone's comfortable with it, if you want to do a draft, you and I can work on it.
Yeah, and maybe if people have suggestions for things that they would like to highlight beyond, I mean, we could talk about the survey, of course. I mean, if that's a something that we've done or something that we're engaged in. Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably targeting like a couple hundred words, right? It's not going to be a huge thing. So I'll take a first crack at it. Gail?
Okay.
I'm a better editor than I am writer, but it would be good. This would be our chance to give a thumbnail sketch of the results of the survey.
Yes.
Just another way to, that we're here and we're active and want to know what you think.
How about Gail, just to make it easier on Nate, since you've sort of written a little bit about that for the email you sent out?
Yeah.
Do you want to just sort of like take a
Sure.
shot and send him a
I'll
blurb
send
on
you
that?
a paragraph or less about the survey results.
Yeah, and I think, the one thing I would say, Nate, to include, and I'm happy to look it over, is this is also a good time to remind the many people who are on other committees that we're interested in talking to them.
Mhm.
So I think just putting something to say, we're planning on reaching out to various committees to talk about these.
Great.
And
Okay.
of course, include our webpage so people can
Mhm.
check it out. But I thank you for raising that. And the other things that, there's the Mass Insight that Gail got us onto finally. So I went to it, but I didn't browse around yet, but we can now log in and get information. Gail, have you gone in yet?
Yes, and it's the questions and answers are basically for anybody who can read, write, and we have read-only privileges. So I suggested you go way down the list to the dashboard and the reports. And we can read reports on our town. That's really what we're after.
Cool, great. Well, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, one last thing Becky told me is with the energy audit, her main takeaway was that the town buildings, especially this, she pointed out the school, I don't know if it's all the town buildings, but we don't have LED lights. And that would be a big thing to get, so.
Excellent.
So like that could be on your school liaison list.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, well, this is good. I'll put together, our agenda for the next meeting based on this conversation, but have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded. Leslie, I take that as a second. Okay. Any discussion? Yeah. Miriam, Zoe,
I.
Gail,
Aye.
Leslie,
Aye.
Nate,
Aye.
and I'm an I. Thank you all for another pleasant evening and good discussion. Nate, thanks for taking the minutes on the fly. Appreciate it. Have a good rest of the night.
Thank you, everybody.
And
See you
3
guys.
weeks. Good night.